Welcome to Creamer Media's Polity. I'm Amy Witherden. With me in the studio is Jemima and Njeri Kariri of the International Crime in Africa program at the Institute for Security Studies. On June 30th, Ms. Kariri wrote an article describing the African Union's commitment to the International Criminal Court and the fight against impunity in Africa. Then, on July 14th, following the AU summit at the beginning of July, a second article came out concerning the AU's decision not to cooperate with the ICC, in direct contradiction to the AU's previous commitment to the court. Jemima, in your articles you talk about a meeting earlier this year of African states that are party to the Rome Statute. The outcome of this meeting was a firm commitment to the ICC's work in Africa. Can you outline the undertakings and recommendations that came out of this meeting?
Thank you, Amy. Now, the meeting that you alluded to was actually a ministerial meeting of state parties that are signatory to the Rome Statutes. And this meeting was convened as a result of a decision that was reached at a meeting of the AU member states that was held on the 5th of February 2009, where the AU requested the state parties to the Rome Statutes to meet to discuss the implications or the work, or the implication of the work of the court in Africa. Now, out of this meeting that was held in Addis Ababa, some of the recommendations that came from the meeting included a reaffirmment to commitment towards ending of impunity in Africa, good governance and the rule of law, and of course this basically is in line with the Constitutive Act of the African Union. Another recommendation that came out of that meeting was that as a result of another recommendation made at the 5th February meeting, which requested the African Commission and the African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights to get together to interrogate or to investigate the possibilities and implications of the African Court of Peoples and Human Rights being able to deal with cases of international crime. Of course, this includes cases around crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. The other recommendation related to legal recourse and issues around immunities, because it was felt that, you know, if there's a legal provision relating to immunities, then that needs to be taken into consideration. The fourth recommendation related to issues around capacity building and training, particularly for legal drafters, and looking into model legislation that relates to international crime in Africa. And also a recommendation towards cooperation or cooperating within Africa for various entities that work on issues of crime, that would be around police, prosecutors, to see how they can cooperate, you know, to ensure that these issues are dealt with accordingly. There was also another recommendation that related to the African Union. The ministerial meeting put across a recommendation that the African Union heads of states and governments should come together and put across a recommendation to the UN Security Council requesting for a deferral of the case against President al-Bashir of Sudan, which is in line with Article 16 of the Rome Statutes. And finally, there was a recommendation around hosting of state parties to the Rome Statutes preparatory meeting for the upcoming review conference that's taking place in Kampala during 2010. So those are the main recommendations.
Okay. Now, at the AU summit in the beginning of July, a resolution was passed stating that the AU would not cooperate with the provisions of Article 98 of the Rome Statute. What do you think has changed in the reasoning of African states?
Now, one thing that we must put into consideration is that the June meeting was a meeting of the state parties to the Rome Statutes. And it came out very clearly that they are committed to the ICC. Now, one issue that has been a bone of contention, of course, is that the African Union feels that the requests that they sent to the UN Security Council for a deferral for the case against al-Bashir of Sudan has been ignored. That's the word that they have used. And of course, I mean, the AU, most of AU member states are members of the United Nations, and they felt that at least something needs to be said to them. But the main issue here, according to the AU, is around Article 98 of the Rome Statutes. This article has to do with issues around immunities, and these immunities relate to bilateral agreements that may have been entered into by the various organizations, by the various member states. And this is a very complicated legal provision, I must say, because one of the issues that some critics have raised is that if, for example, a US soldier cannot be tried or cannot be prosecuted by the ICC for that matter under Article 98, why would an African president, head of state, be prosecuted by the same court? Of course, you know, the two wrongs don't make one right, but I think it's important that these issues are dealt with, and the AU has come out and, you know, they have highlighted this as one of the articles that they would probably put across to the review conference that's taking place in 2010.
Now, how does this refusal to cooperate with Article 98 affect the legal standing of the 30 African states that subscribe to the Rome Statute?
Any member state that has signed up to an international treaty has got legal obligations to live up to it. So the decision that was made by the African Union is basically, I would call it a political decision, but there are also legal implications, there are also legal decisions, there are legal treaties that have to be lived up to. So what I would say to that is that each of the member states that is signatory to the Rome Statutes has got legal status to make sure that they live up to what they have signed up for. Unless maybe there's a situation where maybe a member state has ratified, and of course that comes with also legal provisions, whether the AU has indicated that you know, they're not going to cooperate with the ICC, the legal provisions require that the signatory states live up to the expectations.
Now, following the AU summit at the beginning of this month, Botswana spoke out strongly against the outcome of this summit, saying that Africa should not undermine the work of the ICC. Do you think South Africa's failure to speak out against the outcome of the AU summit undermines its role as a leader in Africa?
Now, one thing that we must not forget is that South Africa has been a leader in international justice. First of all, South Africa has done a lot of work even in the continent. South Africa has been involved in Burundi, in Sudan. Currently, former President Mbeki is heading an AU panel that is looking into the conflict in Darfur. We have got a lot of, you know, various interventions that the South African government itself has led in Africa and beyond. And during the establishment of the ICC and the Rome Statute, South Africa was involved. You know, there were many organizations from the region that went that held discussions relating to the establishment. And one notable issue is that South Africa was actually the first African state to domesticate the Rome Statutes. As such, you know, even under the constitution of the country, South Africa has been very much involved, you know, in all this. Now, what does not seem to come out very clearly is what happened at the African Union Summit. Botswana has come out openly and indicated that, you know, the decision that came from the African Union Summit is not according to their commitment. Chad has been reported to have also not agreed with the statement, and also Ghana has also been reported as to not have been party to the statement, but South Africa has been silent. Of course, this silence has been interpreted by different quarters as maybe supporting the statement, and quite a few civil society organizations and interested parties have actually gone ahead and requested the government of South Africa to, you know, raise up a voice and indicate what their stand is, especially in line with the constitution and the provision of the national legislation. Now, the onus is on the government of South Africa to rise up, for example, and decide and indicate what their stand is. But as far as South Africa losing its stature, you know, as a leader of Africa, I think it's still premature to make that decision or to make that conclusion because, first of all, that statement is still to be debated in Parliament. And depending on the outcome, then of course South Africa has to weigh the constitutional obligations, the legal obligations, and then take it from there. But I would really want to call upon the government of South Africa to consider these obligations that they have put across, both internationally, nationally, and regionally, and to ensure that they live up to their obligation.
Thank you, Jemima.
Thank you.
That was Jemima and Njeri Kariri of the Institute for Security Studies on the African Union's about turn in its dealings with the International Criminal Court.